This is The Balance Dilemma. We tackle the often uniquely, but not always, female dilemma, managing life, work, family, and self. I'm Maura Carlin.
And I'm Christy Derrico. At The Balance Dilemma, we speak with women and men to hear their balanced stories. Our guests are entrepreneurs, reinventors, creators, executives, parents, and partners, telling us what we really want to know. How the heck did they manage that? And can you have it all and all at the same time?
Pivots, passion, partnership, and product. This episode hits it all. Our guests today are childhood friends who, after building impressive careers in advertising and media, combined their design passion, perfectionist standards, and marketing expertise to launch their kitchen revolution in, of all things, sponges, with their company Skura Style. Linda Sawyer rose to chairman of Deutsch, an advertising agency, and Alison Matz held various publisher roles at high-profile consumer magazines at Condé Nast and Meredith. They left these careers to start Skura Style. Who knew lifelong friendship could result in clean countertops and a growing business? Welcome, Linda and Alison.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Welcome. So, you mentioned meeting at the age of 7 and bonding over a spelling bee, and I think this took place on the playground. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, we were the last two standing in the second grade wide spelling bee, and naturally, because we're a little bit of overachievers, and so the story is that I won. Linda choked on the word pulley, left out the E.
I have a lot of E anxiety now in words.
And but it was really the beginning of a lifelong friendship that we found sort of kindred spirits in many ways.
If you were looking back, would you see the seeds of a business or entrepreneurship in yourselves, Lynn? You weren't talking about selling dolls or, putting together.
She was.
I probably was. But no, I think more what we look back on is I think we see certain traits of our personality. And in many respects, like Alison said, we were very competitive, but I'd say really within ourselves, and that we sort of identified that we had a spirit that, to kind of really succeed and growth and challenge.
Well, there is this theme with many of the women we've had on the show talking about women have to be nice while they're being competitive. So it's interesting that friendship, and that's a niceness, you enjoy each other, and that was a component of your success. So there must be something there. That was the early seeds.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So you both had these big careers. Was there a pivotal moment where you said, you know what, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to have my own business, or I want to just do something different?
Yeah, I think, we both, as you said, led very big careers, and actually were quite happy and loved what we were doing. But I think that we both felt like we always had an entrepreneurial itch. And while in a way, I think some of our success in our corporate careers was because we thrived on like sort of the entrepreneurial aspect of our clients' business. We just always said it would be so exciting to do something one day together. And I think, we recognized too that even though we had kind of hit the pinnacles of our careers, that we wanted to sort of explore what could be next and challenge ourselves on something really new and doing it together as a second act.
So I just want you to be clear for our audience that this wasn't two childhood friends who separated and re-met each other later on. I mean, you raised your children in the same town. You have basically been friends all along, which, not to date all of us.
It's a long time.
Well, no, that's not what I was going to say. It wasn't so easy back then where staying in touch required expensive phone calls, letters, maybe our parents keeping the connection, and yet you managed to do it. And how is that?
Yeah, I think, when we graduated, we through, grade school, middle school, high school, went, off to separate colleges, but stayed close during college, and then eventually both landed back in New York City and got married and had, our children. And then we were in related careers, Linda in advertising and I was in media. So we often talk shop because there were so many parallels between the businesses. And I think that was part of that talking shop gave us an insight into each other's managerial styles, our values, and as far as business goes, and kind of practice runs for when we decided to kind of jump off the cliff.
And what in your individual skills did you each bring to the table, and how did you decide who would do what? Did it just come naturally? Did you plan that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Alison said, because we talked a lot throughout the years about, our management philosophy, we shared a lot of war stories, we felt like probably the thing that maybe differentiated us the most was personality-wise on the surface, but that we actually are very like-minded. And I think we depart a little bit from how a lot of partnerships work, where it's more of a division of responsibilities. We are one person, basically, and I think it's more like we center on a subject and we discuss and spar about it, but we really work incredibly collaboratively.
And you both came from large structures, okay?
Yes.
And then this is a small business.
Yes.
Tell us about that. Was that a big change?
Oh my gosh, huge.
So when you're small, you got to do everything.
It is the biggest change ever. I mean, we joke about this, being, in corporate America, particularly back, many years ago, there was, that executive assistant who handed you that Post-it note telling you that you had to get off this call or finish this meeting to go to the next. And we'll be over on a Zoom. I'll say, Linda, I'm sending you a virtual Post-it note. Time to go.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's that support and that having to figure everything out on your own. That is it's just there's not we don't have 10 departments to support us. We have had to learn and figure it out. And
you came from, I remember going to meetings in places where they would hit a button and someone would bring a platter with coffee.
Oh, yes.
Right. And
yes.
then it's so ridiculous you're lucky if there's water in the Keurig when you're running a small office.
Exactly.
And just having, bench strength and, this depth of experience. And I mean, yes, for me, it was a real shock because I had over 1,000 people working for me. So it was a huge change. And, but then you don't have the kind of gratification that you have to actually have your hands in everything and feel like you are truly making the product.
Well, it's truly undercover boss also.
In many ways, yes.
When you're in a large structure, someone at the top may not understand why there's some issue. You're doing everything. You're seeing why sales are hitting, why they aren't, who's responding to you. So there's pluses and minuses. So.
Absolutely.
Are there things that you do allocate? Alison will take care of the advertising, or you'll take care of the advertising, Linda, and Alison will take care of marketing, or more specifically something like, okay, I'll take care of this set of numbers and you'll take care of that. Do you actually split things, or you just sit down and do it together?
Mostly together. I mean, there's little divisions of labor, but for the most part, we find that we support each other and we get things done quickly. And I think that there's an element of, rather than having to only motivate yourself, we kind of push each other and we just get stuff done really quickly. And whereas if we were isolated, I think then I might kind of, lose attention at times and, lose motivation.
So when Christy and I have to get something done, we actually sit down shoulder to shoulder because we find that we can knock it out and
Absolutely.
There's
work
a
it out
synergy that happens.
So
do you feel being mothers, I mean, mothers are constantly multitasking and have to get things done under pressure and get it done right.
Yes, yes.
Sometimes what we delegate, I often say, 60% perfect, and I'm just going to have to deal with that. But in this instance, do you feel that has facilitated your corporate dream, this little business you've had?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's, the fact that we had to multitask so much when we were in our careers with children, it sort of really preps you to be able to handle a million balls in the air. So it absolutely, was a great part of what makes us, I think, so efficient and decisive, and we just get it done. I mean, we also always remark that having worked with very big clients, what they would take maybe 6 months to get accomplished, we do in a matter of days.
So let's talk about where this great idea came from and why cleaning supplies.
Yeah, we had often before we get into that, we had often talked about wanting to do something together and something entrepreneurial, building something from the ground up. We didn't know what it was at the time, but we would throw all kinds of crazy spaghetti ideas on the wall, and then Linda should take, how we landed on this because it was really her inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm a real home design enthusiast, as I would say Alison is too. We really, have such an appreciation for beautiful design. And I also am a total clean fanatic. I mean, I am a bit obsessive, but cleaning for me is so much more than the functional aspect of getting something clean. It's a sense of control and a sense of completion. And sort of for me, like having a clean home is a clear mind. And it just... So I was always very struck by the fact that every inch of the kitchen has experienced design innovation. And, even the most benign products like paper towel holders and dish racks and garbage cans can be beautiful now, and they all perform better. And I was like, why is it that this one item front and center that largely almost everyone has is trapped in time? It's ugly, it's disgusting, it just hasn't kept pace on any
It's
level.
yellow and green.
Yeah, and it smells. And I'm like, and I said, Alison, I've always wondered about this. And when I shared it with her, she's like, wow, you know what? I wouldn't even have a sponge because I find them so disgusting in my home.
It's true.
She was
own
a spongephobe.
Yeah, I wouldn't own sponges. When I would occasionally have them, I would, I'd be lazy about putting on the rubber gloves, and I'd like hold it between my fingernails, and they were gross.
So this is really something that you disliked.
Yeah, it's
That inspired you to come up with something
the ultimate
you did
pain
like.
point.
Yes. And then we're like, if we feel this way, we feel this way, I wasn't thinking about it. So, if, there's an opportunity there, this unmet unconscious need of people that have disdain for sponges but aren't even thinking about them. And then, and then we started doing a little research. We did consumer research, and it was like, you scratch the surface. People have an absolute hate affair with sponges, and we're like, we're on to something. There's there's something here that we have to figure out.
It's an issue in my relationship.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes. I mean,
we save marriages.
Yes, he gets really mad if I don't squeeze it out and,
Yes.
just throw the darn thing away.
We hear all the time about
Yes.
couples and partners that
And
one will want to keep it forever, and they're like, why? And the other's like, this is disgusting, I want to throw it out. So
Yes.
we always say a good, intervention with a couple can save their marriage.
Yes.
So I've seen you refer to the Larry Page toothbrush
Yes.
test.
Yes.
Tell us what that means. I mean, you're talking about Larry Page of Google. Right?
Yeah,
And how that influenced you.
This quote of, if something passes the toothbrush test, it's a good idea or it's worth investing in. And what that toothbrush is something you use every day that makes your life better. Very simple concept. And that really applies to the sponge. One, you use it every day, multiple times a day. And ours, in the way that we designed it and developed it, does make your life better because it, you're not spreading germs, and it's...
So I want to get into that, but I first want to ask this one
Yeah.
question: is a kitchen sponge really dirtier than a toilet?
Yes.
Yes. There is
200,000.
actually...
As everyone groans and
Yes.
squeals
Yeah.
internally.
I mean, the average kitchen sponge is 200,000 times dirtier than a toilet seat. They are bacteria breeding machines. The reason they smell, which everyone knows they smell, a lot of people don't connect the dots that it's actually the bacteria that is causing the smell. And it's just beyond irony that you're cleaning with a dirty tool. It makes no sense whatsoever. And there's a lot of science behind this. We had the benefit of tapping into all this research that existed, because the other thing is that people, as you mentioned, hold on to their sponge for too long, and they admit it, but they admit it with embarrassment and apology. Like, I don't know why I do it. It's so disgusting. But leading microbiologists say throw your sponge out every 1 to 2 weeks because that is the only way.
All right, you said the word. Antimicrobial.
Yes.
What is it? How does it apply to the sponge? I've seen that word. I think I'm always aiming for it, and I'm not really sure what it is. Tell us.
So antimicrobial means our sponge is treated with an antimicrobial agent that inhibits the growth of odor-causing bacteria, mold, and mildew. So, if you think about a traditional kitchen sponge, what it does well is absorb. And it has all the little nooks and crannies. And by absorbing well, it means it's holding onto moisture, holding onto food particles, and growing them very, very rapidly. Our sponge is made of a different material than traditional cellulose sponges, and it is a different porosity, different pore structure, so there's less room for growth, but the antimicrobial agent inhibits things from growing. It is not 100%, if you keep this sponge lying around for 2 months, you're going to start to get some growth. And that's why we designed it with our logo on the scouring surface fades with use to tell you when it's time to throw it out. And that's how we save marriages, because we take out that conflict of like, it's old, it's got to go. No, let's keep it,
So how long?
Well, so leading microbiologists say that you should throw out your sponge every 1 to 2 weeks. And so, depending on how much you're using it, as an empty nester, we don't cook a lot. We don't use our sponge that much. Linda, even though she's empty nest, cooks a lot, or she doesn't, her husband does. But
I clean a lot.
She cleans a lot. But it's a gauge of 1 to 2 weeks. And they say that, the traditional kind of sanitizing methods that people use, like the microwave or the dishwasher, are not really sufficient.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah.
So those are not really worth doing.
They're problematic because microwave, first of all, can be dangerous because there can be hot spots that people don't realize till after the fact and burn themselves. But a dishwasher actually does kill bacteria, but it tends to kill the weaker bacteria, and it leaves room for the stronger bacteria to have more real estate, like this survival of the fittest, to propagate even faster. So it's they say bleaching for 4 hours will do the trick, but I don't know many people that will do that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to hold up the product so the cameras can really see it. Right, and we want to get into how you made it. I mean, you've got to deal with prototypes. You've got to have the research. You have to then find production. Talk about that for
Walk us through this whole process, because we have had businesses that sell food. We had another woman who brought a product to market. This stuff is complicated. So tell us, idea to sitting in our studio with your beautiful sponges.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, we do think the fact that we didn't know what we didn't know
we didn't know what we were doing
was an outside advantage for
Absolutely.
sure. And when we started to write a business plan, naturally our lens tended to be very marketing oriented and branding. So we had the vision of what this brand could be, what its point of view, its values, how it would work. We even had ad-like objects. We did a whole thing, and then we kind of kept congratulating ourselves how brilliant it was until we kept saying we don't have a product. So that's a problem. And what we found out was that the leading sponges in this country, green and yellow and blue, is owned by 3M, and they have basically a monopoly. And they own a lot of the material supply as well. So we hit a lot of walls where, frankly, more than several times over a decade, we were like, oh, now we know why no one's done this. It really can't be done. And we almost aborted mission several times.
The microchips of sponges.
Yes.
Exactly.
And then we said, why would we want to use those materials? Like, we kind of had an aha moment. They're disgusting. And even if we make them prettier, it has the same inherent problems of them being dirty and disgusting. So Alison, who's a bit of a Google queen.
Yeah, but now ChatGPT is my new best friend. It's like I'm like obsessed. But,
You're not alone.
I would wake up in the middle of the night, literally, and be like, what can we do? How can we make this? What can we do? And I go deep into the bowels of Google and just researching things. And I came upon a foam manufacturer. And they talked about this foam that they had that had, the properties that were equivalent to cellulose in absorbency, but antimicrobial properties. I'm like, ooh, maybe we can make a sponge out of that. And so we wrote to the CEO of the company, because that's how we that's how we roll. But we got it immediately went down to their whoever people, and we had a meeting, and we met with other manufacturing partners, and they thought we were they thought we were like two cute housewives, honestly. We drive out to New Jersey, we have a meeting, but they started making prototypes for us. And
how many rounds did you do of prototypes?
So many rounds.
I think people don't realize that it takes a lot, which takes a lot of money.
Absolutely.
Plus, when they typically print these things, they aren't like on massive slabs. So it was kind of amazing that they saw a nugget of something that they were willing to invest the time and money, because it was not an easy thing to pull off. But even the kinds of questions they asked us, they were like, really? You want to make this gray custom foam? Why? And we're like, well, have you been in the modern kitchen? Like that might look good in there versus blue or yellow.
Right.
Because all their samples were just copying what was out there. And we're like, no, and they're like, it's going to cost more. And we're like, that's okay. If it's beautiful and it's a better product, it's worth it. So
this is the part of the story. One of my favorite shows is How I Built This.
Yes.
Especially the earlier episodes, but listening to the story of Spanx or Bobby Brown with how she made her lipsticks. They found one person who gave them a chance, gave them a prototype, and there it all is.
Yes.
So it sounds like a similar story
we definitely
with you.
did. And they are actually our manufacturer to this day. So it really worked out. But we did a lot of experimentation. I mean, even what it took to identify the right amount of printing and inkage to...
What was the magic to that? Because I think most would just say, oh, that's a nice design, but don't realize what goes behind it.
Yeah, and we wanted this product to be aesthetically beautiful, but it had to have superior functional benefits to what's in the market. And having this technology, because we wanted to answer all the pain points. We wanted to not smell. We wanted to look good on your counter. We wanted to avoid the fight with your spouse or partner of when to throw it out. We wanted to adhere to the microbiologist's recommendations of longevity and what we call good sponge etiquette. And so we wanted a mechanism to let you know when to throw it out. So we we wanted to have this designer look. So we had this logo monogram treatment that made it sort of iconic and identifiable, kind of like the buttons on your jacket. More, I know who made your jacket. It's beautiful, but it's like that identifiable monogram. So we worked with our manufacturers and tons of testing of what's the right level of printing that's going to fade.
What is that?
This fades literally within 1 to 2 weeks with use, to tell you when it's time to throw it out.
Who thought of that idea with the fading?
Harebrained cockamamie scheme. I don't know.
I will tell you, it actually started with more of a design look.
Yes.
And then when we were doing torture tests and all kinds of things.
Torture tests?
Torture tests. I mean, you should see the things I was concocting. It was not your shake that you were describing before, but it would be every harsh kind of abrasive salts and, acidic vinegars and whatever to see how long this thing would last. And then we're putting it through and then we're like, oh no, that's going away too soon. And it was and then we were like, there is this, as I said, and people readily admit their complacency about throwing it out, and they really are embarrassed and apologetic about it. And we said, why not lean right into this? And then we kind of switched gears and thought about, doing the testing to see how could we get it to this time frame of what leading microbiologists recommend as really the amount of time that you should maintain a sponge.
And I'm just looking at what we have on the table here.
Yes.
So we have the sponges, which everyone knows. The very scrubby is just like a harsh...
It has all the great qualities of this sponge, antimicrobial. Another thing we didn't say that's amazing about this and this is that it rinses clean. So if you we would say it passes the cheesy omelet test. If you make a disgustingly cheesy omelet, on every sponge, it will basically, your yesterday's breakfast will be there as long as you keep the sponge, which is repulsive.
Or if you put chia seeds in your protein, the chia seeds, they'll stick in a regular sponge and start to grow a chia pet. This won't happen.
Everything rinses right off. So, and then but this is heavy duty, so it's great for, you have a Dutch oven, you clean this, it'll look brand new. And it's also unlike a Brillo pet or something that not only can hurt your hand when you're using it, it's stiff and whatever. This is really pliable, so it gets in little nooks and crannies. So this is like a powerhouse combination.
Yep.
And then you're right. We have obviously we maintain and use the monogram. And the thing about all of our products is every one of them is designed, they're not gratuitous products. They were designed because of a pain point that we identified, and then we came up with a product that offered innovative performance benefits with a beautiful, aesthetic design to it.
So is this what you consider, like Spanx, a disruptor brand?
Yes.
Absolutely. And she was an inspiration.
Yeah.
We were students of every disruptor brand out there
Yes.
and what they did. And we really followed them very closely and felt that we could get a lot of, best practices and best learning.
Now, if you looked at your life, your schedule, when you were back at the jobs that, let's call them the 9-to-5 life,
Yeah.
and now
That weren't 9 to 5.
Yeah.
That were hardly 9 to 5.
mislabeled 9-to-5, but you
Yes.
know what I'm saying. And then
Yes.
we have today where you are entrepreneurs. Tell us, do you work more? Do you work differently? What would you say on that topic? How was that switch from
Definitely
one life to another?
Definitely differently. I mean, I think that the old, when you fit in the exercise routine is different than when you fit it in now. There's a little more flexibility in that. The kind of really having a hard time turning it off ever as an entrepreneur is really challenging. I don't think that I necessarily religiously checked my email constantly on the weekends in my old corporate life. Maybe there's a glance, but now it's sort of like the store's always open. We have to be aware of what's happening out there. We do have, someone who mans customer service, but, customers are, writing in, all the time. And you've got to make sure things are moving along. So there's a restructure, but I would say it's definitely emotionally more for me. And I was very, dedicated, worked my butt off, morning, noon, and night. But
Well,
it's
you
different.
see it in your kitchen.
Yes, yes.
It's hard to get. It is
inescapable.
hard
Yes.
to get away
you
from
cannot
it.
escape
Yeah.
it.
Right?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
the name. Can we jump to the name? How
Yeah.
did this come up?
So skura is actually a real Swedish word, and it means to scour and scrub. And the inspiration for it was that a very long-term client of mine was IKEA. And I have to say, I learned so much from them that I have applied to this whole experience. And when we came up with, finally had a real plan, I had done some outreach to some of my old former contacts, and someone had recommended a designer to us, and he was a former IKEA industrial designer, did a lot of their very successful lines, and he has been working with us since
And he's a Swede.
pre-launch, and he's a Swede.
Yeah.
And in many ways, he's been like our brand muse. And we love Scandinavian design, and it's simple and clean and modern and happy. And so when we were doing a series of a gazillion names, brainstorming, he had brought up actually to us. I think we said, "What are some Swedish words that, like, just out of curiosity, maybe?" And he said "skura," and it was like,
Well, it's got the
Oh,
K.
that-
There's the
Yes.
K is a good letter in branding.
and
So
so
But it also, to scour. It means to scour and scrub, and skura sounds like what it does.
It does sound like that.
And it also, as students of brands, European nomenclature has, gives you an elevated brand persona and premium, and this is a premium brand, and and it's not made up like the way Haagen-Dazs was a
Yeah.
made-up word, but this is a real Swedish word.
Yeah, and what's really nice too is over time and in a very organic way, our customers use skura as both a noun and a verb. They say, "I need my skura," not like
And
I
I
need
need
a
to
sponge.
skura.
Yes.
And I need to skura it. And we always say, don't just clean it,
we
skura
love
it.
words like that.
Totally.
So you've got your product, you've got your name, you got to raise money.
Yep.
Yes.
Was that part of